Everybody please, let's stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Folks, welcome. This is, of course, South Florida Conservatives' first meeting in the election year. Now that the clock has struck 12, it's no longer something distant, something out there. We're now in an election year, folks. Something magical has to occur now. That means that every one of us has to get up and get out of your comfort zones. Very important. I wanted to say a few words about the things that are going to be occurring because, of course, in Florida, our primary is January 31st. A very, very important occurrence. It's a time for you to get in there and decide who you want the standard bearer to be from this moment forward. A very important thing. This is why at South Florida Conservative we're very concerned and very preoccupied with getting you the best information possible and getting all the candidates or their surrogates, whenever possible, in for direct questioning and to listen exactly to what they have to say. It's very important in this election, more than any other, that we make the most informed, most educated decision possible. With that in mind, and because we have a very important, in fact, critical primary at the end of this month, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be having several special meetings for other candidates or other candidate surrogates that may be popping in before the primary. So please stay alert to the email and come on in. Just like we're doing tonight, come on in, ask the relevant questions, the important things that you need to know. Don't forget, the question that you may ask is very important because there might be somebody sitting here tonight that may make up their mind based on what you asked. Your question, your inquiry might be critical in somebody else's thinking. They may go with that candidate, they may not go with that candidate. In any case, your participation in your primary to elect your standard bearer is critical. In this organization, the South Florida Conservative, we welcome all candidates. All the candidates must have a voice at this table. This is a primary, and that means we are to debate, we are to talk, we are to discuss, we are to bring out all these issues into the open. What else is a primary for, folks? I can't think of a better reason for us to get out and discuss the things that are important to us all. Important to somebody who we think should represent us, important to the future of our republic, than doing what is necessary, obligatory, in a primary. I remember back when you used to have the old punch cards, when you used to vote here in Florida. When I used to vote, I used to get that punch card, and before I let it drop into the box, I would say, this is for the blood of all the patriots that died before us. Think about that for a second. You're standing there and you're voting, and the blood of a patriot, of a soldier, a sailor, an airman, a marine has paid for you to be able to put that vote in. Why do I say that? Because voting is not just a right, it is a responsibility. As you are here tonight, your important assignment is to motivate others to vote, to participate in the primary and participate in the issues of your republic. It is your republic to lose, folks. I often cite and talk with friends of mine who can't understand why people die in the Florida Straits to come over here and live in this country. Folks, let me tell you something. People that come to this country on an inner tube or in a rickety boat that cannot take any more souls aboard, What must they be risking? Why must they want to come here? Why must they want to live here in this country? The reason should be compelling to all of us, and that is that America is exceptional. America is that shining beacon of freedom that the world over, if you gave people the choice, where would you want to live? Where would you want to prosper? Where would you want to raise your children? They say the United States of America. Think about that for a second. And think about how lucky we all are. And that bestows upon us the responsibility to vote, to participate. A couple of elections ago, I was ashamed to know that there was a higher voter turnout in Iraq than in the United States for certain elections. And that should not be. That is a travesty. We need to get up and vote. We need to get up and inform others. We need to get up and make others aware. Maybe they just haven't heard something that's motivated to do it, but it's up to you to do so. Tonight, we're going to have a very distinguished guest that's going to talk to us about why he supports Ron Paul for president. And like I stated before, this organization will spare no effort to bring you as many candidates and as many candidate surrogates to bring you that perspective for you. And for you to turn around and pass on to others. I cannot emphasize this too strongly. This primary, this election, this November, is to eliminate and vote out the most radical, the most leftist president we've ever had in the history of this republic. If we don't do that, folks, if we don't come together and vote as a movement and vote as a concerned country, there's a very real danger that that republic that people risk their lives to come across the sea to be a part of, there is a very real possibility that republic will cease to exist as we know it. Let me remind you that the President of the United States promised that he would fundamentally transform the United States of America. I, for one, believe him. Why? His actions have demonstrated that's exactly what he intends to do. His tenacity to circumvent the Constitution, to circumvent the legislative bodies, to circumvent everything that is dear to this country is obvious, blatant, and absolutely inexcusable. We should all be outraged at the things that are going on and how the Constitution is being trampled upon by somebody who dared pervert and subjugate such a marvelous word as hope. Hope is what everybody has coming to this country. It's up to us as a movement and as a nation to demonstrate to others that hope is really what conservatism, what libertarianism is all about. Hope is what gives to those folks that want to come here and through the sweat of their own brow, own their piece of land, own that dream. Remember, folks, the Obama administration would help you believe that owning a house is a right. Everybody has a right to own a house. Well, I'm sorry, folks, it's the American dream, not the American entitlement. You earn the right to purchase your house with the sweat of your brow, working your fingers to the bone in a country that has no limits. No limits. The only limits it has is your goals. Whatever your goals are, if you work in this country and set everything you have to it, you can achieve it. The current president is trying to tell you that you are too dumb to do that. You are too worthless to do that because the only thing that can fulfill your dreams is the government. An all-pervasive, all-powerful, nefarious government that is the sunrise and the sunset of your existence. Folks, we must, in this election, rise as a movement and as Americans, Americans that cherish freedom and liberty, and let everyone know, coast to coast, the world over, that hope and change is not something that can be subjugated by a left-winger that made his career, made his bona fides by teaching rules for radicals in the University of Chicago. Hope, as it pertains to this country, is something so much more. Hope is what conservatism is all about, because hope is what fueled the very first people to question why they should live under a tyranny and why it was worth their blood, their livelihood, to separate from England. We have to, in this election cycle, demonstrate that we know what that is, what it means, and where it belongs properly, and that we will not allow somebody to subjugate what this very republic is all about. Now that I'm off my soapbox, what I would like to do is bring forward a very accomplished gentleman. He is an economic historian. He is an author. He's been on a lot more TV than I'll ever be, I'll tell you that much. He's fought the battles. He's here to give you a perspective on a candidate that he stands behind 100%. It is South Florida conservatives' privilege as a series of speakers pertaining to the primary to welcome up here Mr. Thomas DiLorenzo.
Thank you, Marcus. Thanks for inviting me to come down. I'm a resident of Delray Beach, actually, so I'm a local guy. Although I drove down in that horrible turnpike to get down here, and I'm never do that again. And I was asked to talk about Ron Paul and why he should be elected president. And I've known Ron Paul since 1983 when I wrote my first book on the regulation of financial markets. And he had a television show in Washington, D.C., and he interviewed me on the television show. And back in 1983, Ron was amazingly well educated in economics. Even though when I met him, he was an OBGYN who had just been elected to Congress a couple of years earlier, and he seemed to know as much about economics as any of my professors in graduate school did. And so this is a self-educated man, a very bright man, and he is just not only head and shoulders, but comparing Ron Paul's understanding of the economy and economics to Romney, Gingrich, Santorum, and the rest is like comparing an elephant to an ant. Really and truly. And after all, that is the best, the biggest issue in America today, isn't it? The depression that we're still in. If you follow the debates, you might have heard that the government has changed the way it calculates unemployment. And the government tells us it's 8.5%. But if they use the same formula that they used just when Ronald Reagan was president, it would be more like 17%. And that is depression-era unemployment that we're still in. So economics is very important. And so if Ron Paul was elected president, there's a good bet that the very first thing he would do would be to issue an executive order repealing all previous executive orders. After all, this is not Cuba. We don't have a dictatorship. And so where did this idea come from, that the president can issue executive orders without participation by the Congress, the people, or the judiciary, for that matter? And so that's one thing Ron Paul would do. And of course, you all probably know that Ron Paul is the most devoted of all the candidates to the Constitution. He really means it. When I gave a talk to his Liberty Caucus several years ago in his office in D.C., which is about 15 members of Congress who are devoted to liberty, they all sort of nodded their heads and agreed that you can no longer make constitutional arguments in Congress against government programs. That would all change with President Ron Paul. He would be, when he was asked who his favorite president was in one of the recent debates, he said Grover Cleveland, a Democrat. One of my articles on the web, on newrockwell.com, is called The Last Good Democrat, about Grover Cleveland, who was the king of the veto. Ron Paul is known as Dr. No in Congress because he votes no on anything that is not legitimized by the U.S. Constitution. As president, he would veto anything that is not legitimately a constitutional function. And he would go farther than that. There's been a resurrection in the recent years of the whole idea of nullification. And what this was an idea that is most closely associated with Thomas Jefferson. When the Federalist Party in the 18th century outlawed free speech in America with the Sedition Act, they literally outlawed free speech in America, Thomas Jefferson responded by writing something called the Kentucky Resolve of 1798. He was asked to write it by a friend of his who was a senator from Kentucky. And it essentially says that we are a compact of states, that the Constitution does not say who is to be the interpreter of the Constitution, who is to have the final say. We have a system of government where there are 3 branches, and also the 10th Amendment of the Constitution says that all powers not delegated to the central government are the responsibility of the states and the people. Therefore, the people of the state have an equal say in what is and is not constitutional, along with Congress, the President, and the judiciary. And so Jefferson said, we the people of Kentucky at the time are not going to enforce this law outlawing criticism of the government, which it did. That's what the law did, the Sedition Act. And so Ron Paul would not block attempts by states to engage in legitimate attempts to oppose blatantly unconstitutional laws like Obamacare, for example. He would allow states to opt out to things like this, and much, much more. And much, much more. We have really limitless government now, ladies and gentlemen. Unlimited government, truly unlimited. The only time you see Republicans, your average Republican in Congress, talking about the Constitution is to try to use it to block something the Democrats want to do. The only time you see the Democrats mentioning the Constitution and pretending to be constitutionalists is to use it to block something the Republicans are trying to do. It's a game. It's not a game with Ron Paul. Any of you who paid any attention to him for decades, he's been really our Jefferson. One of my articles on the web is called The Jefferson of Our Time. It might sound a little corny, but he really does follow the principles of the Jeffersonian tradition in American politics. There would be no more raising the debt limit. Ron Paul would veto any attempt to raise the debt limit and force Congress to take a supermajority to spend more money. You know, why even call it debt limits? And it's limitless. That's what we do. I actually testified in Congress over this about 20 years ago, and after the parade of 10 or 12 people before me, I just said, the hell with it, I'm not even going to take my turn. It's a farce. It's a farce. You know, when 4 years ago, when the McCain campaign brought out Senator Phil Gramm, former senator at the time, who has a PhD in economics and taught at Texas A&M before he became a politician, to assure everybody that the economy was in fine shape and that anyone who thinks there's going to be a recession is crazy. 2 months later, the crash occurred. We haven't heard from Senator Phil Gramm ever since. I think he was hanging out in the same cave with Bin Laden and Alan Greenspan in recent years. I haven't heard anything from him. But at the same time, it was Ron Paul in 2003 who was saying, we've got a real estate bubble, the bubble is going to burst and it's going to create a depression. He was on the record in public as saying that. Why was he able to say that? Because, as I said at the beginning, he's been a serious student of Austrian economics, the Austrian Free Market School of Economics, which I am associated with. If anyone wants to learn anything about it, or have your children or grandchildren or nieces and nephews learn about it, go to the website mises.org, it's MISES.org, and you can give yourself a great education in economics just by reading the daily articles and nothing else on there. Ron Paul has been doing that for a long, long time. So he's not a mystic. There's nothing magical about it. There was a very, very straightforward explanation of the business cycle, and that's why he is so critical of the Fed, because those of us who have studied these things understood for a long time that it's not a good idea to put all the money in the hands of a secret organization that is accountable to nobody. Whose idea was that? There was a long struggle in this country. It began almost as soon as the ink was dry on the Constitution to create a bank run by politicians out of the nation's capital. Can you think of a worse idea from the perspective of the taxpayer than a bank run by politicians out of the nation's capital? We had several before the Fed, and they all generated boom and bust cycles in the economy and massive corruption, bailouts of political cronies. Sounds familiar? All the things the Fed does. That's why Ron has been so critical of the Fed, and you're probably aware that he wants the Fed to be audited for the first time. Why shouldn't they? They're in control of all our money. Why shouldn't we audit them? If what they do is in the public interest, why shouldn't the public know about what they do? That's the big question. And of course, Ron had over 300 co-sponsors of this legislation, but they killed it in committee. Barney Frank and the gang were able to kill it so that it couldn't become law. And we just look at the books. And we did make some success, though. We did find out through lawsuits that some of the money that came from the Fed bailed out the European bankers. Not only is it enough to bail out Goldman Sachs and American corporate crooks, but now our Fed bails out European corporate crooks and bankers too, because they're all the same gang. They're all part of the same gang. Having a monopoly of money supply is what we have had for such a long time. Most people can't imagine what it would be like if we had a different system. It is as though the government monopolized the shoe industry for 200 years.